Prosecutors say he took over as one of the leaders of the Sinaloa cartel following his father, Joaquin Guzman's arrest and prison sentence.
Overnight, Ovidio Guzman Lopez, son of notorious drug lord El Chapo, arriving on U.S. soil after being extradited from Mexico on drug trafficking charges.
4 a.m. on January 5th, 2023. A Mexican military helicopter lands in Ovidio Guzman's backyard while he sleeps off a family Christmas party. 12 soldiers grab him in under 10 minutes. But what they find inside that house will keep investigators talking for years. These are the hideout mansions of El Chapo's sons. Some worth millions, some hidden in plain sight. All of them protected by a system so brutal, the Mexican government can't seem to keep up.
Hoy se sabe que al menos 40 sicarios del Cártel del Pacífico defendieron esta casa, la casa de Ovidio Guzmán.
To understand what the soldiers found that morning, you have to understand where they were. Jesus Maria, a tiny town about 40 minutes outside Culiacan, the capital of Sinaloa. There's exactly one highway in and one highway out. And every single foot of that highway is watched. Lookouts on motorcycles, lookouts on hilltops, lookouts at a stone arch welcoming visitors to town. Sitting right there in broad daylight, raising the alarm the second an unknown vehicle rolls in. This is cartel-held country. Mexican soldiers don't patrol it. Mexican police don't pull anyone over here. The only authority that matters is whoever's name is on the wooden gates at the top of the hill. And those gates belong to Ovidio Guzman Lopez, youngest of Los Chapitos, son of the most famous drug lord in modern history, and the man who, by January of 2023, had a $5 million bounty from the United States government on his head. His mansion sat at the top of that hill, looking out over the verdant Sinaloan mountains. The vantage point was the entire point. From up there, Ovidio could see anything coming from miles away. Rival cartels, Mexican military, American DEA. It didn't matter. Over 100 sicarios kept watch in shifts, sitting on top of a white armored Volkswagen Tiguan or a black Chevy Suburban with a machine gun mounted to the roof. 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. The house itself was opulent. Minimalist mahogany and marble furniture, white couches, a panoramic window so massive it stretched across an entire wall, framing the mountains like a painting. A 6-vehicle garage that held 2 Mercedes-Benz G-Wagons, a couple of Razor ATVs, and a Suburban. The kind of place where you'd expect to find a tech billionaire, not a fentanyl trafficker. But this wasn't just a home, it was a bunker. There was an escape tunnel running from the backyard parking lot all the way to the outside of the compound. There were 3 to 6 grenades stashed around the property at any given time. And inside Ovidio's bedroom alone, the Mexican military would later recover 47 weapons. Not pistols, not rifles. Heavy stuff. Including an anti-aircraft gun, sitting there in his bedroom, like a piece of decor. I want you to think about that for a second. Anti-aircraft, in a bedroom. The night before the raid, Ovidio had thrown a family party. He hadn't been able to celebrate Christmas or New Year's with his family because he knew the noose was tightening. So he waited until after the holidays, brought in his wife, his 3 daughters, his mother, and a few friends. They drank expensive wine. They set up a nativity scene in the backyard. They ate at a glass-top dining table. By 3 a.m., everyone was asleep. The wine bottles were still on the table. The nativity scene was still lit up. The baby bottles were still in the kitchen. That's when the helicopters came. The Mexican military landed one chopper directly in his backyard. Another team kicked in the front gate. A dozen soldiers stormed the property. They had Ovidio in custody before he had time to put on shoes, let alone reach the escape tunnel his father had taught him to build. But getting Ovidio out alive? That was the hard part. Because the moment his men realized what was happening, all hell broke loose. What followed was a 10-hour gun battle. Sicarios swarming the compound from every direction. Soldiers pinned down inside the mansion, a military helicopter dumping rounds into cartel convoys, racing toward Jesus Maria on the only road in. By the time it ended, 19 cartel gunmen were dead, 10 Mexican soldiers were dead. 21 cartel foot soldiers were captured, and the mansion that had stood as the crown jewel of Ovidio Guzman's empire was a war zone. The panoramic window, gone, shattered into a ragged hole in the wall. The white couches, turned upside down and darkened with blood. The walls, riddled with bullet holes. The floors, covered in .50 caliber shell casings. There were live, unexploded grenades sitting in the grass outside. There was a baby bottle on the floor of the hallway. There were spent rounds on top of the dining room table where they'd been eating dinner less than 12 hours earlier. A journalist named Luis Chaparro snuck into the property days later, climbing through a hole in the wall while sicarios on motorcycles circled the perimeter. What he saw stopped him cold. The closet was full of empty Rolex boxes, designer shoe boxes turned upside down, drawers pulled out, jewelry cases cracked open and emptied. The Mexican military, according to the neighbors, had quietly hauled out everything of value during the operation. Watches, cash, jewelry, sneakers worth more than most cars.
El primer cuarto es la recámara principal. Allí hay sangre de alguien que aparentemente caminó herido. Todo está revuelto en esta habitación, el colchón fue movido del lugar, los cajones de los burós están abiertos.
But here's the strangest part of all of it. 3 years later, that mansion still stands. Still bullet-pocked, still empty, still owned on paper by Ovidio Guzman's family. And Ovidio's mother, Griselda Lopez Perez, is currently suing the Mexican government for damages. Let that sink in. The wife of El Chapo, the mother of one of the most wanted fentanyl traffickers in the world, a woman with her own $5 million U.S. bounty for cartel involvement, is suing the Mexican government because her son's drug fortress got shot up while soldiers were dragging him out of bed. That's how confident these families are. That's how untouchable they think they are. And the thing is, based on the math, they might be right.
Out of the view of the camera in his cell, behind the partition of his shower stall, a hole in the floor. It leads to this elaborate underground tunnel, complete with electricity, lights, ventilation, and tracks laid along the ground.
To understand why the Chapitos build the way they build, you have to understand the man who taught them. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman was a paranoid man, not without reason. 3 governments wanted him dead or in a cell. Rival cartels wanted his head on a stick. And every time he got close to being caught, he disappeared. Not because he was lucky, because he had built a system. The system was tunnels. In Culiacan alone, El Chapo owned 6 houses. From the outside, they looked completely ordinary. 2-bedroom bungalows, middle-class neighborhoods, bars on the windows, tall metal fences out front. The kind of houses where the neighbors would later tell reporters they had no idea anyone lived there. But underneath every one of those bathtubs was a hydraulic mechanism. Push a button, the tub rises. Underneath is a hand-dug tunnel. And every tunnel connected to the next house, and to the next house, and eventually to the municipal sewage system running under all of Culiacan.
Beneath this bathtub, a secret tunnel. So if you climb down the steps, you find yourself in the tunnel itself, and you can see it's been quite carefully constructed out of wood. You have to crouch a little bit, but you're quite mobile, and there's an electricity system running throughout it.
It was a $100 million drug empire's escape plan, hidden under a piece of porcelain. February 17, 2014, Mexican Marines had El Chapo cornered in one of those exact houses. They kicked down the door. They cleared the living room. They checked the bedroom. By the time they got to the bathroom, the bathtub was already coming back down. El Chapo was already in the sewage system, already running. By the time they figured out what had happened, he was 20 minutes ahead of them. It took them 6 days to catch him again. They only got him because his phone signal pinged from a hotel in Mazatlan. The man understood something most criminals never figure out. It's not the size of the mansion that protects you. It's what's underneath it. When Mexican authorities finally raffled those 6 tunnel-connected houses off in the 2021 National Lottery, they were valued at a combined $1.15 million. That's it. For 6 houses that had hidden the world's most wanted fugitive. For 6 tunnels that had connected one of the most sophisticated drug trafficking operations on Earth. People bought lottery tickets for $12 apiece. Some random Mexican family won house number 5 and didn't even know what they had until the paperwork came through. Of course, that was El Chapo's economy hideouts. His real homes were a different story. If the tunnel houses were the working safe houses, the real estate that the Mexican government has tried to seize over the years is something else entirely. Let's start with Acapulco. $10 million worth of beachfront on Pichilingüe Beach, multiple swimming pools, a tennis court, private boat dock, and a personal zoo. Lions, tigers, panthers, black jaguars, crocodiles, all accessible by a little train that snaked through the enclosures, so El Chapo's guests could ride around looking at his big cats while they sipped cocktails by the ocean. He named his yacht Chapito, after himself. A former pilot named Miguel Angel Martinez testified to all of it under oath during El Chapo's trial in Brooklyn federal court. Martinez had flown El Chapo around for years. He'd seen the lifestyle from the inside, and his exact words on the stand were these, quote, "He had houses at every single beach. He had ranches in every single state, every single beach, every single state." Then there's Tlalpan, an upscale Mexico City neighborhood, where El Chapo owned a 10,000 square foot estate worth $4 million, 9 bedrooms, an indoor pool, multiple jacuzzis, a sauna, a wine cellar, a dedicated party salon that could host 100 guests. The Mexican government raffled that one off too, eventually. Then there's Guadalajara, a sprawling hacienda with tennis courts, multiple pools, and yet another private zoo full of exotic animals. The kind of property where a Saudi prince would feel underdressed. Then there's a 3-story villa in one of Culiacan's most upscale neighborhoods that went under the auction hammer for $587.10. House in dollars in 2019, El Chapo had originally bought it as a gift for Griselda Lopez Perez, the same Griselda Lopez Perez who is now suing the Mexican government over her son's destroyed mansion. The pattern repeats. Then there's a beachfront apartment in the Miramar building in Mazatlan. There's a ranch built specifically for El Chapo's mother that somehow, mysteriously, the authorities never managed to seize. And the personal effects? They tell their own story. When El Chapo was finally captured for the last time in Los Mochis in January of 2016, the Marines found a diamond-encrusted pistol with his initials engraved on the grip. They found stacks of jewelry. They found designer watches still in their original boxes. They found photographs of his trips: Macau for high-stakes gambling, Switzerland for what his pilot would later describe under oath as cellular youth treatment, Argentina, Brazil, Japan, and all over Europe. The man had been traveling the world as one of the most wanted fugitives on the planet, and nobody had been able to stop him. And those are just the ones we know about. Add it all up: the Acapulco mansion at $10 million, the Tlalpan estate at $4 million, the Culiacan villa at $600,000, the Guadalajara hacienda, the Mazatlan apartment, the 6 tunnel houses, the ranches in every state. You're easily over $12 million in confirmed real estate. And that's the public number. That's what it got seized, raffled, auctioned, sold, or photographed by journalists. What's hidden? What's still operational? What's owned through shell companies, through girlfriends, through cousins, through entire networks of front people? That number, nobody knows.
Breaking news now, we are learning that Mexico's most notorious drug kingpin has been extradited to the U.S. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman was handed over to U.S. authorities this afternoon. He's said to be on an airplane to New York right now.
El Chapo was extradited to the United States on January 19, 2017, 12 years to the day after he'd first escaped from Mexican prison in a laundry cart. He's been in ADX Florence ever since, a supermax in Colorado, 23 hours a day in a soundproof concrete cell. He will die there, but the empire didn't die with him. 4 of his sons inherited the operation: Ivan Archivaldo Guzman Salazar, the oldest; Jesus Alfredo Guzman Salazar; Joaquin Guzman Lopez; and Ovidio Guzman Lopez, the youngest. Together they became Los Chapitos, the little Chapos, and they did something their father had never quite managed. They scaled. Where El Chapo had built a cocaine and methamphetamine empire, the Chapitos built a fentanyl empire, cheaper to produce, more addictive, deadlier. They flooded the American black market with synthetic opioids that have killed hundreds of thousands of Americans. The DEA estimates the Chapitos faction of the Sinaloa cartel is responsible for the majority of fentanyl entering the United States today. And they did not live quietly. Iván Archivaldo in particular has spent the last decade flexing on social media. His ex-account is a parade of supercars, Lamborghinis, Ferraris, McLarens, Bugattis, designer watches, gold-plated AK-47s, dreamy villas with infinity pools cantilevered over Mexican coastlines, photos of exotic animals he keeps as pets. He's been called the most flamboyant cartel leader in modern history. He's also been called the most ruthless. Both are probably correct.
Oficialmente no se sabe qué pasó con las hijas de Ovidio Guzmán. Contrario a la recámara de las niñas, la principal, la de Ovidio, no tiene huellas de sangre. Ni el baño, ni el jacuzzi.
And here's the thing. Despite the United States offering a $5 million bounty on Iván Archivaldo's head, despite a $5 million bounty on Jesus Alfredo's head, despite ICE listing them as top-tier fugitives, the Mexican government has never seized a single confirmed mansion belonging to either of them. Not one. They live in their compounds, somewhere in the mountains of Sinaloa, and they go on with their day. In June of 2025, the U.S. Treasury Department added Iván Archivaldo to a fresh round of sanctions, specifically targeting his real estate holdings, construction companies, and a chain of salons reportedly owned through proxies. Treasury thought hitting the financial infrastructure would force the brothers out into the open. It didn't. The properties on the sanctions list were owned through layers of shell companies, registered to relatives, relatives of relatives, and Mexican citizens with no obvious connection to the cartel. The trail went cold within weeks. This is the part that drives American law enforcement insane. We know the addresses of the seized properties. We have photographs of the bullet-riddled gates. We have lottery tickets for the auctioned houses. But the actual current operational hideouts of two of the world's most wanted men? Those don't appear on any seizure list. Those don't get raffled in any national lottery. Because nobody can find them. The hilltop fortress in Jesus Maria was supposed to be the prize. 10 years of intelligence work, Mexican military, Mexican Navy, US DEA, all coordinating. They got Ovidio. They got the 4mm rifle in his closet. They got the anti-aircraft gun. They got the Mercedes G-Wagons. They didn't get Iván. They didn't get Jesus Alfredo. They didn't get the operation. The fentanyl kept flowing. The cocaine kept flowing. The Sinaloa cartel kept moving product across the border like nothing had ever happened. The mansion was a trophy. The empire was the prize. And the empire walked. You want to know how protected these properties are? Look at what happens every time someone tries to seize one. October 17, 2019. The first time the Mexican military attempted to arrest Ovidio Guzmán. 35 National Guard troops surrounded a residential compound in Culiacán. They got him in cuffs. They had him on the phone. They were trying to get him to call his older brother Iván and tell him to stand down. Iván did not stand down. Within minutes, hundreds of cartel sicarios poured into Culiacán. Heavy weapons, 50 caliber rifles, rocket-propelled grenades. They set fire to commercial trucks and used them as barricades blocking major roads. They surrounded the residential compound where the soldiers were holding Ovidio.
Authorities say a heavily armed drug cartel ambushed the military and police, spraying them with bullets. This journalist filming as deafening gunfire rings out around him, taking cover behind his news van.
The chaos spread. Civilians abandoned their cars in the middle of the street and ran for cover. A military aircraft at the local airport got shot. Bullets flew through residential neighborhoods. By the end of the day, at least 13 people were dead. Mexico called it the Battle of Culiacan, the Culiacanazo. And then the president of Mexico made a decision that shocked the world. He ordered the National Guard to release Ovidio, to literally let him walk back out the front door of the compound and disappear into the city. The soldiers had to drop their prisoner and retreat. In the moment that footage came out, the message could not have been clearer. The Mexican government could not, even with hundreds of soldiers and military helicopters, hold one cartel boss in custody for a single day if his family decided he should be free. That was 2019. The Mexican government swore that next time they'd be ready. 3 years later, January of 2023, they came back for him. This time with helicopters, this time with airplanes, this time with hundreds of soldiers, this time at 4 a.m. while he slept. And the response was just as savage. Within minutes of Ovidio's capture, cartel gunmen set up 19 separate roadblocks across the city. They tried to take the airport. They shot at a commercial airplane that had passengers loading onto it, sending civilians ducking under seats while their children screamed. They burned military vehicles. They blocked every route in and out of Culiacan. The Mexican Air Force had to fly Ovidio out of the state in the middle of the firefight. They knew if they tried to drive him out, the convoy would never make it. 29 people died that day, 19 cartel gunmen, 10 Mexican soldiers, the same city, the same cartel, the same family. 3.5 years later, with twice the firepower from the government, the body count was actually higher than the first time. That's the math on these mansions. That's the math on these compounds. Every time the government goes after one Chapito property, dozens of people die, cities burn, air traffic gets grounded, the country grinds to a halt. The cartel makes a phone call, and within minutes, 200 armed men are pointing .50 caliber rifles at military aircraft. Now consider this. The Mexican government has spent 15 years going after El Chapo and his sons. They have seized maybe a dozen confirmed properties. They have killed or captured maybe a few dozen high-ranking sicarios. In that same 15 years, the Sinaloa cartel has grown bigger, richer, more sophisticated, more armed, more territorial. The fentanyl operation alone is worth tens of billions of dollars annually. The properties that have been seized, every single one, have been replaced by 3 more. You don't burn down an anthill by stepping on a single ant.
The leader of one of the world's biggest drug cartels has been arrested in Texas. Ismael Zambada, known as El Mayo, was earlier charged by US prosecutors with conspiracy to make and distribute fentanyl, the drug that is being blamed for the US opioid crisis.
September 9th, 2024. Something happened that should have changed everything. Ismael El Mayo Zambada, the 76-year-old co-founder of the Sinaloa cartel, was flown into United States custody on a private jet. The official story is that he was kidnapped by one of the Chapitos, Joaquin Guzman Lopez, and handed over to the DEA in El Paso as part of a deal. The Chapitos turned on their own godfather, sold him out, to save their own indictments. And in response, the Mayo Zambada faction of the Sinaloa cartel declared war on the Chapitos, an internal civil war that has now been going on for over 1.5 years. Over 4,000 people have died or gone missing in Sinaloa. Bodies left in front of shopping malls, drug rehab facilities massacred, drone strikes dropping homemade explosives on neighborhoods, El Dorado, Sinaloa, La Campiña, Costa Rica. Entire towns turned into battlegrounds. You would think this would be the moment the Mexican government finally takes the Chapitos down. You would think this would be the moment they raid the hidden compounds, seize the mansions, drag Ivan Arch, Uvaldo, out of bed, in his underwear, like they did his brother. It hasn't happened, and it's not going to. Because the cartel war hasn't made the Chapitos weaker. It's made them more scattered, harder to find, more armed, more paranoid, more buried in mountain compounds nobody has the coordinates to. The very chaos that should have ended them has become the camouflage that protects them. Meanwhile, the Ovidio mansion at Jesus Maria still sits there, empty, still riddled with bullet holes, still claimed by the Guzman family, still tied up in a lawsuit that will probably outlast everyone reading this. Ovidio himself pled guilty in a Chicago federal courtroom in 2025, agreeing to cooperate with American prosecutors. He's still in U.S. custody. His brothers, free. The Acapulco beach mansion with the zoo was confiscated, but never sold. Squatters live in some of the buildings. The pool is empty. The yacht is gone. The tigers were transferred to a Mexican wildlife sanctuary years ago. Nobody knows where most of the money from the operation ended up. The Tlalpan estate was raffled off in 2021. Mexican officials said the proceeds would go to children's charities. Some of it probably did. Most of it probably didn't. The 6 tunnel houses are owned by random Mexican families now, who renovated over the bathtub mechanisms and the secret hatches. The tunnels are still there. Nobody knows for sure how many other houses in Culiacan have similar tunnels that were never discovered. And the mansions belonging to Ivan Archivaldo Guzman Salazar, the man who right now, today, is functionally one of the most powerful drug lords on earth. Those have never appeared on any government seizure list. Anywhere. Ever. They exist on his Instagram, on his X account, in photographs taken from supercars at golden hour, behind walls that no government has ever breached. Look at what we actually know about the man. He's been a federal fugitive in both Mexico and the United States since 2008. He has a face that's been on wanted posters for almost 2 decades. He posts photos of himself with his face uncovered, holding gold-plated rifles, standing in front of mansions, sitting in convertibles. And nobody can find him, not because he's hiding particularly well, because the entire infrastructure of Sinaloa is built to make sure nobody finds him. Every police officer in Culiacan knows who he is. Every taxi driver knows where the family lives. Every neighborhood knows which homes to never approach. The information is everywhere. It just doesn't travel. The hideout mansions of El Chapo's sons are not really about the buildings. They never were. The buildings are just real estate. What protects these properties is the system. The lookouts, the corrupted officials, the 100 armed men with mounted machine guns who show up the moment the wrong vehicle comes down the highway. The willingness of the cartel to burn an entire city to the ground rather than lose one family member to a cell. $12 million in confirmed mansions across Culiacan, Acapulco, Mexico City, Guadalajara, Mazatlan. That's the figure on paper. That's what the Mexican government claims to have seized over the years. But ask yourself this. If after 15 years of arrests, raids, helicopter assaults, military operations, lottery raffles, and federal indictments, the Chapitos are richer, more powerful, and harder to find than ever before, what does seizing the buildings actually mean? The mansions are not the empire. They were never the empire. They were just the addresses where the empire happened to sleep. And as long as the system around them keeps working, the cartel keeps building new ones. 2 for every 1 taken. 5 for every 10. An empire that grows back faster than any government can cut it down. The truth is uncomfortable. The truth is, the Mexican government will probably never get the mansions that actually matter, because the mansions that matter are the ones nobody has heard of yet. And by the time anyone does, the Chapitos will already be living somewhere new,